The Geneva International Convention Center gleamed under the Swiss autumn sun, its glass facade reflecting the parade of black sedans delivering diplomats from 47 nations. Inside the main conference hall, tension hung thick as morning fog. This wasn't just another summit. The Global Trade Alliance talks had stalled for 18 months, and three economies teetered on the brink of collapse because of it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Ambassador Victoria Brennan smoothed her navy blazer and checked her reflection in the polished marble column. 23 years in the diplomatic corps, and she'd never seen stakes this high. Her assistant approached with a tablet displaying the seating arrangements. The Russian delegation is already inside, ma'am. Minister Volkov brought his full team. Victoria nodded, her jaw set. Dmitry Volkov was notorious for his aggressive negotiation tactics and his complete dismissal of junior staff. She'd need every advantage today. What she didn't know was that the real advantage was already in the building. Wearing a housekeeping uniform and pushing a supply cart down the service corridor, 12-year-old Marcus Chen moved through the convention center's back hallways with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd spent countless hours in spaces where he wasn't supposed to be noticed. His mother, Linda Chen, had worked as a housekeeper at the center for 7 years. During school breaks and after classes, Marcus often accompanied her, completing his homework in storage rooms and empty conference spaces. Today was different, though. Today, the center was hosting something massive, and his mother had strict instructions to keep him out of sight. The diplomats and their security teams didn't appreciate reminders that regular people worked in these gilded spaces. Marcus had other plans. He wasn't trying to cause trouble. He was curious. For months, he'd been listening to the news coverage of the summit on his mother's small radio while she cleaned offices late into the evening. He'd heard the debates about tariffs, sanctions, and trade routes. More importantly, he'd heard them in 5 different languages. His gift for languages had started early. His mother spoke Mandarin at home, teaching him the characters and tones from the time he could talk. His father, who'd passed away when Marcus was 6, had been Filipino, and Marcus still remembered Tagalog lullabies and phrases. At school, he'd devoured Spanish classes, staying after to practice with his teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. Russian came from Mr. Petrov, the elderly superintendent of their apartment building, who taught Marcus chess and curse words in equal measure, and Arabic that he'd learned from YouTube videos and library books. Fascinated by the script and sounds, his mother called it a blessing. His teachers called it exceptional. Marcus just thought it was normal to want to understand what people were saying. The main conference hall buzzed with pre-session activity. Translators checked their equipment in soundproof booths suspended along the walls. Junior diplomats shuffled papers and whispered last-minute intelligence. Security personnel stood at every entrance, their earpieces crackling with periodic updates. Ambassador Brennan took her seat at the center of the American delegation's table. To her left sat her economic advisor, Thomas Wright, a man whose entire personality seemed constructed from spreadsheets and statistical models. To her right, her chief of staff, Patricia Morales, reviewed talking points on her laptop. Across the circular table arrangement, Minister Volkov lounged in his chair with calculated casualness, speaking in rapid Russian to his aides. He caught Victoria's eye and offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The Chinese delegation, led by Ambassador Li Wei, sat with formal precision, their expressions unreadable. The European Union's representative, Commissioner Hans Eriksson, looked tired already, and the session hadn't even started. The moderator, Secretary General Antoine Dubois, stood at the central podium. His silver hair and rumpled suit gave him the appearance of a disappointed professor. Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin. We have much ground to cover, and I'm afraid our previous sessions have been unproductive. Polite laughter rippled through the room, but everyone knew it wasn't really funny. Unproductive was a diplomatic way of saying catastrophic, Dubois continued. Today's agenda focuses on the critical issue of technology transfer agreements and intellectual property protections in emerging markets. Ambassador Brennan, the floor is yours. Victoria stood, her prepared remarks crisp and confident. She spoke for 12 minutes, outlining the American position on patent protections and enforcement mechanisms. Her words were measured, her tone firm but not aggressive. When she finished, Minister Volkov leaned forward. A lovely speech, Ambassador, truly, but perhaps too lovely, too polished. It makes one wonder if you've actually considered the real-world implications, or if you're simply reading what your corporate sponsors have written for you. The Geneva International Convention Center gleamed under the Swiss autumn sun, its glass facade reflecting the parade of black sedans delivering diplomats from 47 nations. Inside the main conference hall, tension hung thick as morning fog. This wasn't just another summit. The Global Trade Alliance talks had stalled for 18 months, and 3 economies teetered on the brink of collapse because of it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Ambassador Victoria Brennan smoothed her navy blazer and checked her reflection in the polished marble column. 23 years in the diplomatic corps, and she'd never seen stakes this high. Her assistant approached with a tablet displaying the seating arrangements. The Russian delegation is already inside, ma'am. Minister Volkov brought his full team. Victoria nodded, her jaw set. Dmitry Volkov was notorious for his aggressive negotiation tactics and his complete dismissal of junior staff. She'd need every advantage today. What she didn't know was that the real advantage was already in the building. Wearing a housekeeping uniform and pushing a supply cart down the service corridor, 12-year-old Marcus, Jen moved through the convention center's back hallways with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd spent countless hours in spaces where he wasn't supposed to be noticed. His mother, Linda Chen, had worked as a housekeeper at the center for 7 years. During school breaks and after classes, Marcus often accompanied her, completing his homework in storage rooms and empty conference spaces. Today was different, though. Today, the center was hosting something massive, and his mother had strict instructions to keep him out of sight. The diplomats and their security teams didn't appreciate reminders that regular people worked in these gilded spaces. Marcus had other plans. He wasn't trying to cause trouble. He was curious. For months, he'd been listening to the news coverage of the summit on his mother's small radio while she cleaned offices late into the evening. He'd heard the debates about tariffs, sanctions, and trade routes. More importantly, he'd heard them in 5 different languages. His gift for languages had started early. His mother spoke Mandarin at home, teaching him the characters and tones from the time he could talk. His father, who'd passed away when Marcus was 6, had been Filipino, and Marcus still remembered Tagalog lullabies and phrases. At school, he'd devoured Spanish classes, staying after to practice with his teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. Russian came from Mr. Petrov, the elderly superintendent of their apartment building, who taught Marcus chess and curse words in equal measure, and Arabic that he'd learned from YouTube videos and library books. Fascinated by the script and sounds, his mother called it a blessing. His teachers called it exceptional. Marcus just thought it was normal to want to understand what people were saying. The main conference hall buzzed with pre-session activity. Translators checked their equipment in soundproof booths suspended along the walls. Junior diplomats shuffled papers and whispered last-minute intelligence. Security personnel stood at every entrance, their earpieces crackling with periodic updates. Ambassador Brennan took her seat at the center of the American delegation's table. To her left sat her economic advisor, Thomas Wright, a man whose entire personality seemed constructed from spreadsheets and statistical models. To her right, her chief of staff, Patricia Morales, reviewed talking points on her laptop. Across the circular table arrangement, Minister Volkov lounged in his chair with calculated casualness, speaking in rapid Russian to his aides. He caught Victoria's eye and offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The Chinese delegation, led by Ambassador Li Wei, sat with formal precision, their expressions unreadable. The European Union's representative, Commissioner Hans Eriksson, looked tired already, and the session hadn't even started. The moderator, Secretary General Antoine Dubois, stood at the central podium. His silver hair and rumpled suit gave him the appearance of a disappointed professor. "Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin. We have much ground to cover, and I'm afraid our previous sessions have been unproductive." Polite laughter rippled through the room, but everyone knew it wasn't really funny. "Unproductive" was a diplomatic way of saying catastrophic, Dubois continued. "Today's agenda focuses on the critical issue of technology transfer agreements and intellectual property protections in emerging markets. Ambassador Brennan, the floor is yours." Victoria stood, her prepared remarks crisp and confident. She spoke for 12 minutes, outlining the American position on patent protections and enforcement mechanisms. Her words were measured, her tone firm but not aggressive. When she finished, Minister Volkov leaned forward. "A lovely speech, Ambassador, truly. But perhaps too lovely, too polished. It makes one wonder if you've actually considered the real-world implications, or if you're simply reading what your corporate sponsors have written for you. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Victoria's hands clenched into fists under the table. She wanted to respond, to defend herself, but Patricia's hand on her arm stopped her. And then, from the back of the room, near the service entrance, a young voice spoke. "You're wrong." Every head turned. The silence that followed was absolute. 47 national delegations, their staff, translators, and security personnel all turned toward the service entrance, where a 12-year-old boy in worn sneakers and a backpack stood in the doorway. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He hadn't meant to speak out loud. The words had just escaped, propelled by frustration at watching Volkov manipulate the entire room with his linguistic games while hiding his true intentions. 2 security guards were already moving toward him, their faces stern. His mother was going to kill him. Worse, she might lose her job. "Wait!" Ambassador Brennan's voice cut through the commotion. She stood studying the boy with curious intensity. "Let him speak," Minister Volkov laughed, a sharp bark of disbelief. "You cannot be serious. We're suspending international negotiations to hear from a child who wandered in from the hallway." "Why not?" Victoria's eyes never left Marcus. Something about the boy's expression, not defiant, not scared, but determined, intrigued her. "You've spent the last 30 minutes lecturing us about linguistic superiority and cultural understanding. Let's see if age matters as much as language does." Secretary General Dubois looked torn between protocol and curiosity. "This is highly irregular. So is switching between 5 languages to confuse your negotiating partners," Victoria countered. She gestured to Marcus. "Come here." "What's your name?" Marcus's legs felt like water, but he forced himself to walk forward. Every eye in the room tracked his movement. He could see his mother through the service entrance now, her face pale with horror. "Marcus Chen." "Ma'am?" His voice came out steadier than he expected. "And why do you think Minister Volkov is wrong, Marcus?" Volkov slammed his hand on the table. "This is absurd. I will not be interrogated by a child. Who is he? How did he get in here? This is a security breach." "He's the son of one of our housekeeping staff," Dubois said quietly, checking something on his tablet. "Linda Chen. She's worked here for 7 years. Excellent record." Marcus saw his mother in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She was shaking her head frantically, begging him silently to stay quiet, to apologize, to leave. But Marcus couldn't. Not now. Not after hearing what he'd heard. "You said Ambassador Brennan couldn't understand cultural nuance through a translator," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "But you've been doing worse than that. You've been using languages as weapons, not bridges." Volkov's face darkened. I don't need a lecture from... You told your aide in Russian 3 minutes ago that you'd accept the American proposal if they made private concessions on natural gas pipeline access through Eastern Europe. Marcus spoke the words carefully, precisely. But that wasn't translated. You said it knowing the official translators couldn't keep up with how fast you were speaking. The room erupted. Delegates began talking over each other. The Russian translator in his booth looked panicked, frantically checking his recordings. Volkov stood frozen, his expression shifting from shock to anger to calculation in rapid succession. "That's a lie," Volkov said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The boy is making things up." Marcus switched to Russian, his accent nearly perfect, thanks to countless hours with Mr. Petrov. He repeated exactly what Volkov had said, word for word, including the specific pipeline routes and the percentage of throughput Russia would demand. Ambassador Li Wei leaned forward. "Is this accurate, Minister?" "The boy obviously has coaching," Volkov said quickly. "Someone fed him this information. This is a setup by the American delegation. We didn't even know he existed until 2 minutes ago," Patricia Morales said dryly. Marcus wasn't done. He switched to Mandarin, addressing the Chinese delegation directly. "Minister Volkov also told you in Mandarin that his proposal protected your manufacturing interests. But his Russian version to his aides said the opposite, that China would have to accept technology transfer limits that would hurt your semiconductor industry." Ambassador Li's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened. He spoke in Mandarin to his advisors, too quickly for the translators to catch. Then he looked at Marcus. "Young man, can you repeat what you just heard me say to my colleagues?" Marcus did, flawlessly. Li nodded slowly. "Interesting." Commissioner Erickson spoke up. "Minister Volkov, perhaps you'd like to address these allegations." Volkov's composure was cracking. "I will not dignify these accusations from a child. This is clearly a coordinated attack on Russia's position. I demand to know who put him up to this." "Nobody put me up to anything," Marcus said. "I was just listening. My mom works here, and I've been in the building during previous sessions. I've heard a lot of things." Secretary General Dubois' expression shifted from confusion to something approaching wonder. "How many languages do you speak, Marcus?" "5, sir. Mandarin, Tagalog, Spanish, Russian, and Arabic. And English, obviously." "Obviously," Dubois repeated, a smile tugging at his lips. "And you learned these?" "How?" "My mom taught me Mandarin. My dad taught me Tagalog before he died. I learned Spanish in school, Russian from our building superintendent, and Arabic from library books and videos." Victoria was staring at Marcus with open admiration now. "You taught yourself Arabic?" "The script is really beautiful," Marcus said simply, "and I wanted to understand the news coverage from different perspectives, not just American translations." Minister Volkov attempted to regain control. "This is all very touching, but it doesn't change the fact that this is a private, high-level negotiation. The boy needs to leave immediately." "Actually," Ambassador Li said quietly, "I think he should stay. If Minister Volkov has been saying different things in different languages, perhaps we need someone who can catch those discrepancies." "You cannot be serious," Volkov sputtered. "You want to give a child access to classified negotiations?" "He already has access," Patricia pointed out. "He's been in the building during previous sessions, apparently learning quite a lot." Victoria made a decision. "Marcus, you mentioned you heard Minister Volkov say something about natural gas pipelines. What exactly did he say?" Marcus took a breath. This was it. Once he started, there was no going back. His mother would be furious. His teachers would probably hear about this. But the truth mattered, didn't it? He began to speak, laying out everything he'd overheard over the past weeks. Not just from today's session, but from previous negotiations when he'd been tucked away in storage rooms and empty offices. Doing homework while his mother cleaned, he explained how Volkov had told the Brazilian delegation in Portuguese, which Marcus had picked up enough of to understand, through its similarity to Spanish, that agricultural imports would be protected, while simultaneously promising European delegates in French that Brazil would face new Restrictions. He described how the Middle Eastern representatives had been told in Arabic that oil pricing mechanisms would remain unchanged, while Volkov had assured the Americans in English that Russia would help pressure OPEC to increase production. He outlined the web of contradictions and private deals that Volkov had been spinning, using language barriers as cover. With each revelation, the tension in the room grew. Delegates began checking their own notes, conferring with their translators, pulling up recorded transcripts. The Russian translator in his booth was frantically reviewing files, his face growing paler by the minute. Finally, the translator spoke through the general intercom. I need to issue a correction. The translations I provided for Minister Volkov's statements over the past 3 sessions were incomplete. He was speaking too rapidly in certain sections, and I missed several key phrases. This young man's account appears to be accurate. Volkov's face had gone from red to white. You're all taking the word of a child over a senior diplomatic official. This is outrageous. No, Ambassador Lee said calmly. We're taking the word of someone who understands 5 languages over someone who's been exploiting the fact that most of us understand only 1 or 2. Commissioner Eriksson nodded. I second that assessment. Minister Volkov, I think you owe this delegation an explanation. Volkov gathered his papers with sharp, angry movements. I owe you nothing. Russia will not participate in negotiations that have been compromised by American espionage, using children as pawns. Oh, sit down, Dmitri, a voice said from the Russian delegation. One of Volkov's own aides, a younger man with intelligent eyes, stood up. This has gone far enough. Volkov whirled on him. Deputy Minister Kozlov, you will remain silent. But Kozlov didn't sit. He looked at Marcus, then at the assembled delegates. Everything the boy said is true. Minister Volkov has been undermining these negotiations for months, making promises he had no intention of keeping. He's been playing us all against each other. The room exploded into chaos again. Volkov began shouting at Kozlov in Russian. Security guards moved forward, unsure whether to restrain anyone or just maintain order. Secretary General Dubois was banging a gavel that nobody could hear over the noise. Through it all, Marcus stood in the center of the room, suddenly very aware that he'd just changed the course of international diplomacy while wearing a backpack with Spider-Man patches on it. Victoria caught his eye and smiled. It wasn't a diplomatic smile. It was genuine, warm and grateful. Then she looked at Volkov, and her smile vanished. Minister, I think it's time for you to translate yourself right out of this room. The doors burst open. Linda Chen rushed in, her housekeeping uniform wrinkled, her eyes red. She grabbed Marcus's arm. I'm so sorry, she said in rapid Mandarin to the assembled diplomats. My son, he shouldn't be here. Please, I'll take him away. Don't let this affect Mrs. Chen. Ambassador Lee stood and responded in Mandarin. Your son may have just saved these negotiations. You should be very proud. Linda stared at him, uncomprehending. Marcus squeezed her hand and explained quietly what had happened. As understanding dawned, his mother's expression cycled through horror, disbelief, and finally, reluctant pride. Minister Volkov made one final attempt at control. This changes nothing. Russia's position stands. No, Deputy Minister Kozlov said firmly. It doesn't. Minister Volkov, you're relieved. I'm assuming leadership of this delegation, effective immediately. Volkov looked like he might attack someone. Instead, he grabbed his briefcase and stormed toward the exit, his remaining loyal aides scrambling after him. As the door slammed behind him, the room fell into stunned silence. Secretary General Dubois cleared his throat. Well, that was unprecedented. Shall we take a short recess? Agreed, multiple voices said simultaneously. As delegates filed out, talking in urgent clusters, Victoria approached Marcus and his mother. Mrs. Chen, I'm Ambassador Victoria Brennan. I'd very much like to speak with you and your son, if that's acceptable. Linda looked terrified. We didn't mean to cause trouble. Marcus, he listens to everything. I should have been more careful. No, Victoria said gently. You should be proud. Your son has an extraordinary gift. Marcus felt his face flush. I just told the truth about what I heard. That, Victoria said, is sometimes the bravest thing anyone can do. The coffee lounge adjacent to the main conference hall had never felt so crowded. Diplomats who usually maintained careful distance from one another now clustered in tight groups, their voices low but urgent. News of what had happened was already spreading through the building like wildfire. Marcus sat in a leather chair that was too big for him, his mother beside him, holding his hand so tightly it almost hurt. Across from them, Ambassador Brennan sipped her coffee, studying them both with thoughtful eyes. "I need to ask you something, Marcus, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Victoria set down her cup. "How long have you been listening to these sessions?" Marcus glanced at his mother, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "Since last spring. Mom sometimes works late when there are big conferences. She lets me come with her instead of staying home alone. And you've been absorbing everything? I usually do my homework in the storage rooms or the empty offices on the third floor, but sometimes I can hear through the vents. The acoustics in this building are really good." Patricia Morales, who joined them with her own coffee, let out a low whistle. "Kid, do you have any idea what intelligence agencies would pay for the kind of access you've had?" "Patricia," Victoria said sharply, "I'm just saying." "He's been an unintentional fly on the wall for months of classified discussions." Patricia looked at Linda. "Mrs. Chen, did you know he was listening?" Linda shook her head miserably. "I thought he was doing schoolwork. I told him to stay away from the conference areas. I had no idea he could hear anything, or that he understood so many languages. How could you not know your son speaks 5 languages?" Patricia's tone was incredulous rather than accusatory. "I work 2 jobs, Linda said quietly. "The housekeeping here and night shifts at a hotel downtown. Marcus is a good student. He does his homework. He doesn't get into trouble. I knew he was learning Spanish at school, and we speak Mandarin at home. But I didn't realize." She trailed off, looking at her son with a mixture of pride and worry. Marcus squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't think it was a big deal." "Not a big deal." A new voice entered the conversation. Ambassador Li Wei approached with a slight smile. "Young man, you've just exposed one of the most sophisticated diplomatic deceptions I've seen in 30 years. I'd call that significant." He pulled up a chair, ignoring protocol entirely. "Mrs. Chen, your son told me something in Mandarin earlier. He used a very specific dialect, Sichuanese. Where did he learn that?" "My grandmother," Marcus said. "She lived with us until I was 8. She only spoke Sichuanese, so I had to learn it to talk to her." Lee nodded slowly. "The accent is perfect. You captured not just the words, but the cultural context. When you translated what Minister Volkov said, you didn't just give me the literal meaning. You understood the implications." Commissioner Erickson joined the growing circle. "This is what I don't understand. Volkov is many things, but he's not stupid. How did he not realize someone might be listening who could understand multiple languages?" "Arrogance," Victoria said simply. "He assumed that anyone with that kind of linguistic ability would be seated at these tables as an official translator or diplomat. It never occurred to him that a 12-year-old doing homework in the back hallways might be fluent in 5 languages. 6, actually," Marcus corrected softly. "I've been learning French online. I'm not fluent yet, but I can understand most conversations." Everyone stared at him. "What?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "There are good free resources online, and the library has audio courses." Patricia laughed, almost despite herself. "Kid, when I was 12, I was struggling to pass Spanish 101. You're teaching yourself French for fun." "Languages aren't hard once you understand the patterns," Marcus said. "They're like music. Each one has its own rhythm and structure, but they all connect to each other somehow." Secretary General Dubois appeared, looking harried. "Ambassador Brennan, we need to discuss next steps. The new Russian delegation, wants to reconvene in 30 minutes. Several other countries are requesting private consultations. The media has somehow already gotten wind that something happened, though they don't have details yet. How much time do we have before this becomes a circus?" Victoria asked. "Hours, maybe." "The press is already gathering outside," Dubois looked at Marcus and Linda, which brings up a significant problem. Once word gets out about how Volkov was exposed, this young man is going to become a very high-profile target for journalists, possibly for hostile intelligence services as well. Linda's face went white. What are you saying? I'm saying your son just embarrassed a very powerful man in front of the entire international community. Volkov has friends in Moscow who won't appreciate that. And the media will want to turn Marcus into a sensation, the boy genius who broke the summit wide open. We need to protect them, Ambassador Li said firmly. Both of them. Mrs. Chen could lose her job, or worse. Marcus could become a target. He's a child, Linda said, her voice breaking. He's just a child who likes languages. This isn't fair. Victoria reached across and touched Linda's arm. No, it's not fair. But here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to make sure you and Marcus are safe. I'm assigning security detail to you both until we can assess any potential threats. Second, we're going to control the narrative. If we release the story ourselves, on our terms, we can protect Marcus's privacy while still acknowledging what happened. And third, Ambassador Li added, we're going to make sure that what your son did matters, that it leads to actual progress in these negotiations, not just scandal and headlines. Deputy Minister Kozlov entered the lounge, looking exhausted. He'd spent the last 20 minutes on emergency calls with Moscow, explaining why he'd just relieved his superior in front of 47 nations. Mrs. Chen. Marcus, he said in accented but clear English, I want to apologize on behalf of the Russian Federation. Minister Volkov's behavior was inexcusable. His deception has damaged Russia's credibility and violated the trust that must exist in diplomatic negotiations. Marcus nodded, unsure what to say. Kozlov continued, now addressing the room at large. Moscow has authorized me to make a formal statement. We will accept the terms of the American proposal regarding intellectual property protections, with the understanding that separate discussions about energy infrastructure can happen through appropriate channels. Victoria's eyebrows rose. You're accepting our proposal? Just like that? Just like that, Kozlov confirmed. Volkov was operating beyond his mandate, pursuing personal agendas that didn't align with Russia's actual interests. My government wants these negotiations to succeed. We've wasted enough time, Commissioner Eriksson stood. If Russia is prepared to move forward in good faith, I believe the EU can also commit to the framework. We've been waiting for someone to break the stalemate. Ambassador Li looked thoughtful. China will need to review the specifics, but if the major obstacles are being removed, I'm cautiously optimistic. Within minutes, other delegates began arriving in the lounge, all sensing that something fundamental had shifted. The atmosphere that had been poisonous an hour ago now crackled with unexpected possibility. Marcus watched it all unfold, feeling simultaneously proud and overwhelmed. He just wanted to point out that someone was lying. He hadn't expected to trigger a diplomatic breakthrough. His mother leaned close and whispered in Mandarin, "Are you okay, baby?" He nodded, whispering back in the same language. "I'm okay, Mom. Are you mad at me?" Linda was quiet for a moment. "I should be. You could have gotten both of us into serious trouble, but—" She smiled, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm also so proud I can barely breathe." "Your father would have been proud too." Marcus felt his own eyes sting. His father had always encouraged his curiosity, had been the one to teach him that understanding people meant understanding how they communicated. A commotion at the door interrupted the moment. A young man in a press badge was arguing with security, trying to push his way into the lounge. "I just need a statement. Is it true that a kid exposed Minister Volkov? Is the kid here? Can I get a photo?" Security pushed him back, but the damage was done. The media knew. Victoria stood quickly. "We need to move. Mrs. Chen, Marcus, come with me. We're going to get you somewhere private." She led them through a side door, Patricia and 2 security guards flanking them. They moved through service corridors that Marcus knew better than any of them, eventually arriving at a small VIP suite on the top floor. "You'll stay here until we figure out the security situation," Victoria said. "I've already contacted the State Department. They're arranging protection for you both." "For how long?" Linda asked. until the media storm passes and we're certain there are no credible threats. Could be days, could be weeks. Linda sank onto the couch. I can't miss work. I have bills to pay. And Marcus has school. Your employer has already been contacted, Patricia said gently. You're on paid leave. And Marcus's school has been notified that he'll be absent for medical reasons. Medical reasons? Marcus asked. It's vague enough to be true. Mental health counts as medical, and specific enough that people won't ask questions. Patricia explained. Trust me, you don't want your classmates knowing about this. Not yet. Marcus hadn't thought about that. What would his friends say? Would they think he was cool, or would they think he was weird? Would his teachers treat him differently? Victoria's phone buzzed. She read the message and smiled. Secretary General Dubois wants to reconvene in 15 minutes. He thinks we can finalize the framework agreement today. Today, after 18 months of deadlock. Because of what Marcus did. Linda asked. Because your son forced everyone to stop playing games and deal with reality. Victoria looked at Marcus. You didn't just catch a liar. You reminded everyone in that room why we're supposed to be here. To solve problems, not create them. There was a knock at the door. Security checked, then allowed Ambassador Lee to enter. I wanted to speak with you before the session resumes, he said to Marcus. What you did took courage, but it also took wisdom. You could have used what you knew to embarrass people or gain attention. Instead, you used it to reveal the truth. That's rare at any age. Marcus felt his face flush. I just said what I heard. That's what makes it powerful, Lee replied. You weren't trying to be clever or strategic. You were simply honest. He pulled a small card from his pocket and handed it to Linda. When things settle down, I'd like to discuss an opportunity for Marcus. China has educational programs for gifted linguists, scholarships, specialized tutoring, opportunities to study abroad. I think he'd benefit greatly. Linda took the card carefully. We'll think about it. Thank you. After Lee left, Marcus turned to his mother. Do you think things will ever go back to normal? Linda pulled him close. I don't know, baby. But I know we'll figure it out together. Through the window they could see journalists gathering in the plaza below, their cameras pointed at the building. Somewhere in that conference hall, diplomats were preparing to make history, and it all started because a 12-year-old boy had been paying attention. The conference hall felt different when sessions resumed. The artificial politeness had evaporated, replaced by something more genuine, a mixture of embarrassment, determination, and cautious hope. Secretary General Dubois stood at the podium, his rumpled suit somehow looking more authoritative now. Ladies and gentlemen, we find ourselves at an unusual crossroads. Recent events have reminded us that transparency isn't just an ideal, it's a necessity. Deputy Minister Kozlov has graciously agreed to present Russia's revised position. Kozlov stood, his young face serious. Unlike Volkov's theatrical presence, he spoke plainly. For 18 months, these negotiations have stalled because various parties, including my own, have been pursuing hidden agendas. That ends now. Russia proposes a clean framework, intellectual property protections as outlined in the American proposal, energy infrastructure discussions handled through separate bilateral channels, and technology transfer agreements that respect both innovation rights and developing nations' needs. The simplicity was startling. No linguistic gymnastics, no veiled threats, just clear positions. Ambassador Brennan leaned toward Patricia. Did he just agree to everything we've been asking for? Not everything, Patricia whispered back. He kept the bilateral energy talks separate. That's smart. It acknowledges Russia's concerns without tangling them up with the main framework. Commissioner Eriksson spoke next. The European Union supports this approach. We're prepared to finalize terms within the next 72 hours if all parties commit to good faith negotiations. One by one, delegations fell in line. The Brazilian representative, who'd been silent during Volkov's exposure, now spoke candidly about agricultural concerns. The Japanese delegation raised specific questions about semiconductor manufacturing. Even the smaller nations, usually relegated to observer status, began contributing substantive points. It was remarkable. One child's honesty had somehow unlocked 18 months of gridlock. In the VIP suite upstairs, Marcus watched the proceedings on a monitor that Patricia had set up. His mother sat beside him, occasionally glancing at her phone, where messages from co-workers were piling up. News traveled fast in the housekeeping staff network. "They're calling you the kid who broke the summit," Linda said, scrolling through texts. "Maria from the third floor says the journalists outside are offering money for information about you." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of information?" "Everything. Where you go to school, what you like to do, whether you have a girlfriend." Linda's expression darkened. "Someone even asked if we'd be willing to do exclusive interviews." "Mom, I don't want to be on TV." "I know, baby. We won't do anything you're not comfortable with." The suite door opened, and Thomas Wright entered, carrying a tablet and looking uncharacteristically animated. Victoria's economic advisor had spent most of the original session staring at spreadsheets, but now his eyes were bright with excitement. "Mrs. Chen, Marcus, may I show you something?" He set the tablet on the coffee table, displaying a complex graph. "These are projected economic impacts of the framework agreement we're about to finalize. If this goes through, we're looking at increased trade flows worth approximately $340 billion annually across participating nations. That means jobs, reduced costs for consumers, and stabilized markets." Marcus studied the graph. "This is from what's being discussed downstairs?" "Directly from it. Deputy Minister Kozlov's proposal removed the three major sticking points that were preventing agreement. Now everyone's actually solving problems instead of positioning for advantage." Wright looked at Marcus with something approaching awe. "Do you understand what you've done? Millions of people will have better economic opportunities because you spoke up." "I just told the truth," Marcus said, but even as the words left his mouth, they felt inadequate. The numbers on the screen represented real lives, real families, real futures. Linda was reading the graph too, her expression complex. She'd spent 7 years cleaning offices in this building, invisible to the people making decisions that affected the entire world. Now her son had somehow become part of that world, even if just for a moment. "Mr. Wright," she said carefully, "what happens to Marcus after this?" "When the summit ends and everyone goes home?" Wright's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "That's complicated. Ambassador Brennan is working on that." The door opened again, and Victoria herself entered, followed by an older woman with steel-grey hair and sharp, assessing eyes. "Mrs. Chen, Marcus, this is Director Sarah Caldwell from the State Department's Diplomatic Security Service. She's here to discuss your situation." Director Caldwell didn't waste time with pleasantries. She sat across from them, her gaze direct. "I'll be blunt. Minister Volkov has left Switzerland, but he's already making statements to Russian media claiming he was set up by American intelligence. He's positioning you, Marcus, as a trained operative rather than a child who overheard conversations." "That's ridiculous," Linda said. "Of course it is, but it's also effective propaganda. Volkov can't admit he was outwitted by a 12-year-old, so he's creating an alternative narrative. Some people will believe it, which creates a problem for you both." Marcus felt cold. "What kind of problem?" "Potentially harassment, media intrusion, online threats. In a worst-case scenario, someone might try to intimidate you to make a point about American interference. We don't think that's likely, but we need to plan for possibilities." Linda's hand found Marcus's and gripped tight. "What do you suggest?" "Short term, we maintain security detail and keep your location quiet. The summit will conclude in the next few days. Then media attention will shift to the actual agreement. You'll become yesterday's news fairly quickly." Caldwell pulled out her own tablet. "Long term, we need to manage your public profile carefully. The State Department would like to offer you both entry into a low-profile witness protection program." "Witness protection?" Linda's voice rose. "We're not criminals!" "No, but you've become politically inconvenient to some powerful people. The program would give you new identities, relocation assistance, financial support." "No!" Linda stood up, her jaw set. "Absolutely not. We're not running away. We haven't done anything wrong, Victoria stepped forward. Mrs. Chen, Director Caldwell is offering options, not demands. There are alternatives, such as controlled media exposure. We tell your story on your terms, with proper context. Once it's out there, accurately reported, the conspiracy theories lose power. You become a human interest story rather than a political football. Caldwell frowned. That comes with its own risks. The boy would be recognized everywhere. For a while, Victoria acknowledged. But public attention spans are short. 3 months from now, Marcus will be old news. The key is making sure the initial story is accurate. Marcus had been listening carefully. Now he spoke up. What if I don't want to be a story at all? What if I just want to go back to school and be normal? The 3 women looked at him, and he saw the same answer in all their eyes. That ship had sailed. Victoria crouched down to his level. Marcus, I'm not going to lie to you. Your life has changed. You can't unknown what you know, and you can't undo what you've done. But you can control how the story gets told. How? By telling it yourself. By being honest about who you are. A kid who loves languages and happened to overhear something important. Not a spy, not a political operative, just someone who was paying attention. Director Caldwell shook her head. Ambassador, you're asking a 12-year-old to handle media pressure that trained adults struggle with. No, I'm asking a 12-year-old who speaks 6 languages and just exposed a senior diplomat's lies to be himself. I think he can handle it. Marcus looked at his mother. Linda's expression was torn between fear and pride. It's your choice, baby. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. He thought about the journalists outside, hungry for a story. He thought about Minister Volkov spinning lies about him. He thought about his classmates, his teachers, his neighbors, all of whom would hear about this eventually. I'll do one interview, he said finally. Just one. I'll tell the truth about what happened. But then I want to be left alone, Victoria smiled. That's fair. I'll arrange it. We'll choose a journalist who's known for accuracy and fairness. You'll tell your story once clearly, and then it's on record. When? Linda asked. Tomorrow morning. We'll do it here in a controlled environment. Marcus, you'll need to decide what you want to say and what you want to keep private. Your mother will be with you the entire time. After Director Caldwell and Wright left, Victoria lingered. Marcus, can I ask you something? When you first heard Volkov lying, why didn't you tell your mother? Or a teacher? Why did you wait until you were in that conference room? Marcus considered the question. I guess I didn't think anyone would believe me. I'm just a kid. Who listens to kids about international diplomacy? Apparently everyone when the kid is right. Victoria's expression turned thoughtful. You know what the irony is? Volkov spent years building his reputation as a brilliant negotiator. He studied at the best universities, worked his way up through the foreign service, cultivated relationships with powerful people. And in the end, he was undone by a 12-year-old who learned languages because he was curious. Is that bad? Marcus asked. No, it's perfect. It proves that paying attention and telling the truth matters more than credentials and connections. She stood to leave, then paused. Your mother mentioned he passed away. What did he do? He was a translator at the immigration office. He helped people fill out forms and understand their documents. Mum says he made everyone feel welcome, even when they were scared. Victoria nodded slowly. He'd be proud of you. You're doing what he did, helping people understand each other, just on a bigger stage. After she left, Marcus and his mother sat in silence for a while, watching the city lights through the window. Somewhere down there, journalists were crafting headlines. Politicians were strategizing responses. Social media was probably exploding with speculation, but up here, it was just the two of them, like always. Mom, Marcus said quietly. Yes, baby. Do you think things will ever be normal again? Linda pulled him close. I think we'll find a new normal, and maybe that's okay. Maybe normal was getting a little boring anyway. Marcus laughed despite himself. His mother, who'd worked 2 jobs for years just to keep them afloat, who'd never complained about the exhaustion or the struggle, was calling their life boring. I love you, Mom. I love you too, my brilliant, complicated, extraordinary son. On the monitor, the conference session was wrapping up. Delegates were actually smiling, shaking hands with genuine warmth. Secretary General Dubois was announcing that they'd reconvene at 8 the next morning to finalize terms. 18 months of deadlock, broken in a single afternoon, all because a boy who loved languages had decided to speak up. Morning. Light filtered through the VIP suite windows as Marcus, who sat across from journalist Rebecca Hayes. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a recording device placed carefully on the table between them. "Whenever you're ready," Rebecca said gently. "Just tell me what happened in your own words." Marcus glanced at his mother, who nodded encouragement. Victoria stood near the door with Patricia, observers rather than participants. This was Marcus's story to tell. "I like languages," Marcus began. "That's really where it all starts. My mom taught me Mandarin, and my dad taught me Tagalog before he died. I picked up the others because I was curious about how people communicate." Rebecca listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes, but mostly just giving him space to talk. He explained the homework sessions in empty offices, the voices carrying through ventilation systems, the gradual realization that Minister Volkov was saying different things to different people. "I didn't know what to do with what I was hearing," Marcus admitted. "I thought maybe I was misunderstanding something." But then yesterday in the conference room, he was so smug about using languages as weapons instead of tools. That made me angry. "Why?" Rebecca asked. Marcus searched for the right words. "Because languages are supposed to connect people, not divide them. My dad used to say that every language you learn is another way to say, 'I see you, I understand you.' Minister Volkov was doing the opposite, using languages to hide and manipulate." "It felt wrong," Rebecca nodded. "What went through your mind when you spoke up in front of all those diplomats?" "Honestly, I thought my mom was going to kill me." He smiled slightly. "And I was terrified. But I also thought someone needed to say something. If I stayed quiet, all those lies would have kept working. Do you feel like a hero?" Rebecca's question was direct but not mocking. "No, I feel like someone who got lucky that people listened. If I'd been in a different place, or if Ambassador Brennan hadn't let me speak, nothing would have changed. I just happened to be there." Linda spoke up from her seat beside him. "He's always been like this, downplaying his gifts. But what Marcus did took courage. He risked embarrassing me, getting us both in trouble just to tell the truth." Rebecca turned to Linda. "Mrs. Chen, you've worked at the convention center for 7 years. Did you ever imagine your son would change the course of international diplomacy?" Linda laughed, a sound somewhere between amusement and disbelief. "I imagined he'd become a teacher, maybe a translator like his father. This? Never in a million years." "What happens now for both of you?" "We're going home," Linda said firmly. "Marcus goes back to school. I go back to work. We don't let this define our entire lives." Rebecca looked at Marcus. "Is that what you want? To just go back to normal?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. "I want to keep learning languages. Maybe study linguistics in college someday. But I don't want to be famous. I just want to understand people." The interview lasted another 20 minutes. Rebecca asked about his language learning methods, his favorite subjects in school, his dreams for the future. She asked nothing invasive, nothing designed to sensationalize. By the end, Marcus felt like he'd had a conversation with a thoughtful adult rather than being interrogated by the media. "Thank you for trusting me with your story," Rebecca said as she packed up her equipment. "I'll send you the article before it is published, so you can verify I got everything accurate." After she left, Victoria approached with news. The framework agreement was finalized an hour ago. 47 nations signed. "It's done." Marcus felt a strange mixture of emotions, pride, relief, and an odd sense of anticlimax. "So it worked?" "It worked. Deputy Minister Kozlov specifically asked me to thank you. So did Ambassador Lee and at least a dozen others. You've received formal commendations from 6 governments." "Commendations?" Linda asked. Patricia pulled out her phone, scrolling through images. Certificates, letters of appreciation, even a medal from the Brazilian delegation. "They're being delivered to the State Department." You'll get them eventually, probably in some kind of ceremony. Marcus made a face. Do I have to go to a ceremony? Not if you don't want to, Victoria assured him. But Marcus, I want you to understand something. What you did matters. Not just because it fixed these negotiations, but because you reminded everyone that integrity and honesty still have power. In a world full of spin and manipulation, you just told the truth. That's revolutionary. 3 days later, Rebecca's article was published. It was fair, accurate, and humanizing. She portrayed Marcus as a curious kid with a gift for languages, not a political operative or child genius performing for cameras. The headline read, "The boy who just paid attention, how one child's honesty broke a diplomatic deadlock." The response was overwhelming but mostly positive. Social media exploded with support. Teachers shared the article as an example of why education matters. Language learning apps saw a surge in downloads. A senator even quoted Marcus's line about languages being tools for connection in a floor speech. There was negativity too. Conspiracy theorists, Volkov supporters, people who couldn't accept that a child had outsmarted career diplomats. But they were the minority, drowned out by the broader story. Marcus's school handled his return carefully. His principal called an assembly, addressed the elephant in the room directly, and asked students to treat Marcus normally. It mostly worked. He got questions, curious stares, and a few requests for help with Spanish homework. But the frenzy died down within weeks. 2 months later, on a cold December afternoon, Marcus sat in the same library where he'd first checked out Arabic language books. He was working on French conjugations when someone pulled out the chair across from him. Ambassador Brennan sat down with a smile. "Mind if I join you?" "You're back in Geneva?" Marcus asked, surprised. "Just for a few days, closing some follow-up items on the trade agreement. I wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm okay. Things are pretty much back to normal." Victoria glanced at his French workbook. "Still learning?" "Always. I'm thinking about adding Portuguese next. It's similar to Spanish, so it shouldn't be too hard." "Marcus, I wanted to tell you something. That framework agreement we signed, it's working. Trade is flowing, tensions are easing, and 3 countries that were on the brink of economic crisis are stabilizing. Real people are getting real benefits because you spoke up." Marcus closed his book. "That's good. I'm glad, is that all?" "Just, I'm glad." He shrugged. I'm really glad, but I also didn't do it for that reason. I just wanted the lying to stop." Victoria laughed. "You know what? That's exactly why it worked. You weren't playing politics or trying to be clever. You were just being honest." She slid a business card across the table. "This is my direct line. If you ever need anything, advice, help, or just someone to talk to about languages, call me." Marcus took the card carefully. "Thank you." "No, Marcus, thank you." She stood to leave, then paused. "Your father would be incredibly proud. I hope you know that." After she left, Marcus sat for a while, holding the card. Through the library window, he could see the city going about its business. People rushing to appointments, students heading home, shopkeepers closing for the evening. Somewhere in that crowd was his mother, finishing her shift at the hotel. Soon they'd go home together, have dinner, and she'd help him with his math homework while he helped her practice English phrases for difficult guests. Their lives had been disrupted, certainly. Changed, absolutely. But not destroyed, not derailed. Marcus opened his French workbook again. There were still irregular verbs to memorize, still subjunctive moods to master. The work of understanding continued, 1 word at a time. His phone buzzed with a text from his friend David. "Still coming to the movie Friday?" Marcus smiled and typed back, "Yeah, definitely," because that was the thing about being extraordinary. You still had to live an ordinary life. You still had homework and friends and Friday night movies. The world might shift because of something you did, but your world kept spinning at the same speed. He'd spoken truth to power, yes. He'd changed international diplomacy, technically. But he was still Marcus Chen, 7th grader, who got nervous before math tests and loved languages and missed his father and was proud of his mother. The extraordinary moment had passed. The ordinary work of being himself remained, and somehow that felt exactly right. Outside the library, the first snow of winter began to fall, blanketing Geneva in quiet white. Inside, a 12-year-old boy bent over his French workbook, learning another way to say, "I understand you," because in the end, that was what mattered most. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.